So I guess it's just a bit of a call regarding marketing and generating leads and sales. So I'm, I guess trying lots of different marketing channels and getting traction to an extent, but then business sort of tends to flatten off or plateau. So I'm trying, quite a number of different areas, but I guess just wanted to get your advice on where my time would be best spent to maximise return. Mm-hmm. You got any thoughts on that?
Typically I would say whatever's working, double down. Like, mm-hmm. if you've got a marketing pillar that's working, you should double down on it and invest more money. If it's paid advertisement, if it's like, take for example AdWords, then you would, if you can get it to work, then you should spend twice as much and see if you can get twice as much revenue. If you're saying that you start a new campaign, it gives you a bit of an instant hit and then it plateaus, then what that says to me is you're going to have to keep reinventing yourself. You got to change up the creative that people are seeing so that it is kind of always fresh. They're always learning something new from you. They're always seeing a new angle. There are
more value.
Yeah, more value. But there's 1,000 ways to say the same thing. So you can cycle through your value, right? Just approach it in a different way. Let me just think for you on the fly. Let's say, for example, one of your value pieces was that you were fastest in your industry. Let's just say, and you wanted to talk about that. Well, you could talk to camera and say we're fastest. You could do a time, you could do a 1 minute video of a snapshot of time about how you were fastest. You could get a testimonial from a client saying what I really appreciate is they're fastest, right? There's lots of different ways to achieve the same, piece of content. I think from what you're saying is it's got to be fresh all the time. And so that's not easy, but if you think about it and go, okay, that's the one piece of content, how many different ways can I story tell that same piece of content? You'd probably come up with 10. Let's say you came up with 10. Well, you've just 10x'd the amount of content you can put out by doing that.
Yeah. Yep.
Something else to consider.
So you reckon that the online stuff, sorry?
No, you're right. Something else to consider is how can you capture what you're already doing instead of having to come up with new content all the time? Let me give an example. Mm-hmm. You're calling me with your question. I don't have to come up with the content. I just got to answer it.
Yep.
So the first bit of content I did on this show was I taught something. I had to come up with that. The callers, I don't have to come up with. So it's, think about what you're already doing and then work out how to capture it, because then you're not always coming up with new content ideas. And I think that's for most people. Like, you do have to come up with some content yourself, but if you're responsible for coming up with all of it, then that's a tough gig. If you can capture what you're already doing, capture the genius of your business, then that's a lot of content that's amazing because people are paying for it, so people wouldn't mind consuming it. I think that's a great way to go. You were going to ask me a question in there. What was your question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so you focus sort of on content, obviously online, and that's a big element and a big part of it. Is that where you think the time would be best spent, sort of online stuff? Like, obviously, I do things like networking and BNI and that sort of thing as well. I don't know, what would you recommend, that I focus more online or networking and meeting people face-to-face sort of stuff, or what do you think?
It's all, right, because it's 10 pillars, it's not one or two. I think we've always got to find a nice balance between farming and hunting, right? Farming is the content creation to build a brand for future sales, and hunting is get on the phone, ring some prospects and sell them something. Hunting is great because it gives you short-term revenue. Farming is great because it gives you long-term revenue. And so it's both of those all of the time. Some of your energy needs to put towards both. Okay, because if you're always just putting out content and brand building, you go broke in the meantime because there's no short-term sales. If you're only hunting and only going for short-term revenue, you have to repeat that forever to stay alive. So that's why we've got to find that nice balance between some of our attention towards brand building and future revenue, and some of our attention towards short-term kills to get the revenue in to be able to live in the short term. And so you just got to, for example, networking is an active strategy. You've actually got to go. It doesn't work if you don't go. But the cool thing about networking is, you can go meet somebody, have coffee with them on Tuesday, sell them on Wednesday, and make money on Thursday, right? So it's a nice short term. It's also a bit of brand building because you're out to be seen, but it's probably more of a hunting strategy in that regard because you can literally meet people, find out if they have a need, and go and sell them next week. Okay, so you've just got to do both. It can't just be content. That's the mistake that most creative agencies are making, is they're so sold out on brand. Now, what they're saying is not incorrect. The problem is if it takes 6 to 12 months to build a brand that brings in sales, how do you get by, right? There's got to be a strategy for short-term sales as well. So the answer to your question is yes, you should put out content, but you've also got to have the short-term hunting. That you've got to be the caveman that leaves the cave, finds the animal, clubs it over the head, drags it back in, so you can eat in the short term. You've got to be both.
Yeah.
Did you know that this show goes onto Facebook, it goes onto YouTube, it goes onto Instagram, it goes onto iTunes, and it goes onto LinkedIn? Do me a favor, would you? Tell more people about